Hello and welcome to the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Jerome Lavelle, and I hope that you are having an excellent day today. Today we will be looking at Mark chapter 7, verses 14 through 23. Jesus summoned the crowd again and said to them, "Hear me, all of you, and understand. Nothing that enters from outside can defile that person, but the things that come out from within are what defiled." When he got home, away from the crowd, his disciples questioned him about the parable. He said to them, "Are even you likewise without understanding? Do you not realize that everything that goes into a person from outside cannot defile, since it enters not the heart, but the stomach, and passes out into the latrine?" Thus he declared all foods clean. But what comes out of the man, that is what defiles him. From within the man, from his heart, come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. All these evils come from within, and they defile. Today, in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verses 14 through 23, we hear Jesus speaking to the crowd, and the Pharisees and the scribes, and then later his disciples, all who had gathered around him. He had just been asked about violations of the Mosaic laws regarding ritualistic cleansing of hands, of feet, of dishes, and the like. In response to that inquiry, Jesus makes the observation that it is not those things on the outside that defile a person. Rather, it is those things on the inside of a person that really matter. The implication being that what God really cares about is a person's heart. Recall that a big part of Jesus' message is that he is the fulfillment of the old law, and that the old ways, although good and necessary for their time, were not the new, and that he was the new. Recall that in Matthew 5:17, Jesus says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." But we also hear from John in Revelations 21:5, "The one seated on the throne said, 'Behold, I make all things new.'" So Jesus is the new, and that means that he redefines the old, suggesting a transition in God's relationship with us. As an example, he tells us in Matthew 12:7 that God does not desire animal sacrifice. What he wants is your heart. And again, today, what he tells us is that what is on the outside does not defile a person, but what is on the inside. He puts aside the old law for the new law of love, forgiveness, empathy, kindness, care, tenderness, compassion, steadfastness, temperance, and more. As I reflect on today's scripture, what I see is a very direct, poignant, and clear message from Jesus. To me, what he conveys is crystal clear. He says, what comes out of a man, that is what defiles him. And in case his listeners needed more, he says, from within the man, from his heart, come evil thoughts. And he lists them: unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. He says, all these evils come from within, and that is what defiles a person. And so to me, I think he's saying, I am the new law, and rather than worry about arcane rituals, worry about your heart, how you treat God, and how you treat and love your neighbor. To me, he frees the crowd from their worry about every minute detail of some law to focusing on the big picture, the forest of their attitudes, their actions, their words, and their practices. He calls them out of rigidity to something that does not matter, to the freedom of things that ultimately matter. And in doing so, challenges them to change. Today in the Gospel of Mark, we hear Jesus communicating a very profound teaching, breaking from the old law and into the new law, challenging his listeners on that day and challenging us today to focus on our hearts. For if the evils that come from inside us defile us, how much more will the goodness that comes from within draw us closer to God? Thank you for joining the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Jerome Lavelle, and remember, our word of the day is old into new, the goodness that draws us closer to God. Until next time, be well and be blessed.